প্ৰিয় শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল, কৃষ্ণকান্ত সন্দিকৈ ৰাজ্যিক মুক্ত বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ বিদ্যায়তনিক দৃশ্য শ্ৰাব্য অনুষ্ঠানটিলৈ আপোনালোকক স্বাগতম জনাইছো। স্বয়ং প্ৰভা DTH চেনেল 20ৰ যোগেদি শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলৰ অধ্যয়ন কাৰ্য অধিক মনোগ্ৰাহী আৰু ফলপ্ৰসূ হোৱালৈ লক্ষ্য ৰাখি বিভিন্ন বিষয় সামৰি আমাৰ এই বিদ্যায়তনিক অনুষ্ঠানটি সজোৱা হৈছে। আহকচোন প্ৰিয় দৰ্শকসকল, আমাৰ আজিৰ খণ্ডটিৰ মাজলৈ আগবাঢ়ো।
Hello dear learners, I welcome you to this lecture session today, the topic of which is Society, Religion and Cultural Development in Early Medieval India. The lecture is meant for the BA first semester learners of history. The lecture session on this unit will be divided into three parts. The first part shall cover the topic of the society and religious development in the early medieval India, followed by the cultural scenario prevalent at that point of time, and then a detailed discussion on the later part on the topic of feudalism and jati pratha or the caste system. For today's lecture session, we shall focus on the first part. Dear learners, I am Dr. Sukmaya Lama, Assistant Professor in the discipline of History under Suchya Kumar Bhunya School of Social Sciences. In the lecture today, we will be discussing the social conditions and religious development in the early medieval period. Let us begin with the social condition in the early medieval India. The nature of the society during this period of study has been termed as feudal, raising much debates among the historians. We should discuss about it in our next class. Similarly, the discussion on jati pratha or the caste system, which is essential to the understanding of the society for this period, shall also be taken up in the following sessions. But let me just give you a simple answer to what a feudal society means. A feudal society is dominated by a class of people who derive their income from the surplus produced by the peasant. In a feudal society, the peasant is the primary producer of wealth, but his position is that of a dependent. While looking into the societal conditions, let us understand the condition of people. The literary works of the time reveals to us that ministers, officials, feudal lords, even big merchants lived a life of luxury with fine houses, domestic servants to look after them, and attendants who would accompany them wherever they went. There are, however, literary accounts that tell us that such prosperity was limited to only a few. Kalhana mentions that the ordinary people did not have the luxury of eating good food, and often these poor men and women took to robbery for their survival. As for the rural folks, the peasant's life was burdened with numerous taxes and cesses over and above the land revenue. Slavery existed during this period and mostly consisted of prisoners of wars, debtors who were unable to pay their dues, women who were sold for domestic services, etc. Coming to the question of women, let us discuss a little bit about their condition. Child marriage was prevalent, and under certain conditions, remarriages were allowed. Women were more honored in the domestic roles, where their life was regulated by the male members of their household. Parda system wasn't in practice. As mentioned in his writings by Abu Zaid, who was an Arab traveler of the 10th century, he writes how most Indian princes allowed their women to attend the court proceedings without any parda. Regarding dresses and accessories, men and women in general wore dhoti and sari respectively. Coats and trousers, including shoes, were mostly worn by the men of the upper class in North India, as it appears from the sculptures. As for jewelries and ornaments, both men and women were fond of it. We are informed of this from the writings of the travelers. In the matter of food, vegetarian foods were consumed in certain areas and by a certain section of the population, but eating of meat was not cancelled totally. Smriti writers have mentioned the lawful consumption of meat on particular occasions. Likewise, drinking wine was popular among a certain class of people during feasts and such other ceremonial gatherings. For leisures, fairs and festivals, cockfightings, etc. were popular among the common people. The upper class indulged in activities that were royal in nature, like dicing, hunting, etc. Now let us discuss about the religious development of this period. One significant development during this period was the decline of Buddhism and Jainism. The monks from both these faiths faced persecution. We can trace this development to the decline of the patrons of this faith, especially Buddhism. The decline of the Pala rulers in the east gave a serious blow to Buddhism. However, Buddhism itself was undergoing certain internal transitions. The rituals became more elaborate, and the focus was on the belief in mystical practices and gestures. Tantric Buddhism thus became a tradition. It soon caught the attention of Hindu yogis, and it was Gorakhnath who made this tradition popular among the masses. Nathpanthis, as his followers were called, were able to garner a huge support base as they welcomed everyone from different castes and privileges to its fold. It can thus be said that Buddhism, though not popular, yet took a different form, which was very similar along the lines of Hinduism. As for Jainism, as long as it gained the patronage from the ruling class, it thrived. The Chalukyas of Gujarat, the Paramaras of Malwa, and the Ganga rulers of Karnataka were among the few ruling dynasties that favored the Jain faith, the result of which led to the building of Jain temples, Jainalayas, or rest houses for the travelers, images of Jain saints and of Mahavira, building of pillars or Mahastambhas, etc. However, with the increase in the rigidity and along with the loss of patronage, Jainism started to lose its popularity. The other important religious development of this period was the revival and expansion of Hinduism, which took two forms. One was the growth of an intellectual movement, emphasizing the Vedas and the Vedic rituals. On the other hand was the popular movement. In North, it was based on Tantra, and in South India, it was the Bhakti movement that disregarded the caste inequalities. There was rise of the worship of Shiva and Vishnu, who were considered the chief gods, and to claim their supremacy, many grand temples were built. This led to the process of the Hinduization of many local and tribal gods and goddesses, who were now worshipped, but more of as a consort or subordinate. Thus, Goddess Tara began to be worshipped as the consort of Buddha, and Goddess Kali and Durga as the consort of Shiva, which gained prominence in eastern India. These developments within Hinduism increased the power of the Brahmins, who grew arrogant, and as a result of which popular movements emerged targeting them and aimed at preaching the principles of human equality and freedom. Now, what popular movements are we talking about? We are talking about the Bhakti movement that grew in South India and led by many saints like the Nayanmars and Alvars. The emphasis was to give away with the austerities and advocate the bond of love between the worshipper and the god. The emphasis was to give away with the austerities and advocate the bond of love between the worshipper and God. Shiva and Vishnu remained the chief objects of their worship. The Nayanmars worshipped Shiva, the Alvars worshipped Vishnu. Tamil became the medium of speech and writing, which made it popular among the people. The saints, who mostly belonged to the lower class, preached the message of love and devotion and emphasized that the path of bhakti was not exclusive to any caste. Tamil became the medium of speech and writing, which made it popular among the people. The saints, who mostly belonged to the lower class, preached the message of love and devotion and emphasized that the path of bhakti was not exclusive to any castes. The success of the Bhakti movement lies in the fact that it could bring the followers of Jainism and Buddhism within its fold along with the followers of the tribal cults. The teachings of the Alvars were systematized and declared as equivalent to the Vedas by different acharyas, and Nathamuni was the leader of these acharyas. This group of saints and acharyas began to be worshipped in the temple, and later it developed many rituals which is still practiced today. Another popular movement was the Lingayat or Veersaiva movement of the 12th century, founded by Basava and Channabasava. Worshippers of Shiva, the Lingayats were strictly against the caste system, the elaborate rituals of fasting and feasting. On the social front, they opposed child marriage and advocated for widow remarriage. The biggest blow to Jainism and Buddhism was on the intellectual front, and it was brought upon by Shankara. Born in Kerala, Sankara is said to have won an intellectual debate against the Jain scholars, leading to the loss of their influence. His reformulation of the Hindu philosophy is called Advaitavada, or the doctrine of non-dualism. His philosophy is also called Vedanta, as it considers Vedas as a source of true knowledge. According to Sankara, the road to salvation was devotion to God, knowing that God and the created beings were one. It did not gain much followers among the masses, as this philosophy stressed on jnana or knowledge to clean the soul for the attainment of salvation. Nathamuni and other acharyas who followed him claimed that the path of bhakti lay in the study of the scriptures and practicing the rituals prescribed by the Brahmins and hence limited only to the three upper castes. Another acharya named Ramanuja made an attempt to assimilate the bhakti movement to the Veda tradition on the basis of his argument that for attaining salvation, God's grace was important than jnana or knowledge about the superior being. According to him, the path of bhakti was open to all, including the Dalits and the Shudras. This tradition continued to flourish towards later period under Madhavacharya, Ramananda, Vallabhacharya, etc. So with this, we come to the end of this lecture. For reference books or any suggested reading, I would request our learners to go through Satish Chandra's History of Medieval India and Romila Thapar's Early India from the Origins to AD 1300. As for questions and answers segment, the common questions under this segment would be the condition of society during the early medieval period. The other questions that may be asked would be on the Bhakti movement or the reason behind the decline of Jainism and Buddhism. Bullet points may be used for answering these questions. The answers should also ensure that all relevant points are included. For example, while writing on the society, the conditions of women, slaves must not be excluded. In the next session, we will be discussing the architectural traditions of the early medieval period, focusing on the Nagara, Dravida, and the Vesara style of architecture. Before leaving, let me give you a brief summary of what we have discussed so far. We have discussed the society of the early medieval period and the religious development that took place during this time. We discussed the living condition of the people, the condition of women, and the activities pursued during leisure. During this discussion, we understood that the society was stratified and feudal in character, along with the presence of the caste system. With regard to the religious matters, we discussed the decline of Jainism and Buddhism due to the intellectual and literary challenges coming from those who aimed at reviving Hinduism by laying stress on Vedas. We also discussed the Bhakti movement that grew in South India, which opened the gateways to attain salvation for all people, irrespective of their caste. Dear learners, that is it for today. We will meet you soon in yet another interesting session. Till then, take care and stay safe. Thank you. Hello dear learners, I welcome you today to this lecture session, the topic of which is Society, Religion and Cultural Development in Early Medieval India. This lecture is meant for the BA first semester learners of history. We earlier began the lecture session by splitting the topic into three parts. In our previous class, we had discussed the society and religious development in the early medieval India. Today, the lecture shall focus on the aspect of art and culture of the period taken up for the study. In the lecture today, we will be discussing the temple architecture in the early medieval period. Let us begin then. In the early medieval India, the most important activity that received royal patronage was that of temple building. The temples were symbols of grandeur to both the royalty as well as the deity for which it was built. Indeed, there was a definite correlation between the two. The construction of large temples and their regular maintenance required the mobilization of huge amount of resources, both financial and human. This could be possible only when the particular king was wealthy and powerful enough. As for the style, while being variant and rooted to the regional context, however, at the same time, it included features that was recognized throughout the continent. Another feature of the temple architecture of this period was that the sculptures and the architectures were often identified with the craftsmen or shilpi, or an association of builders and sculptors, and thus it tells us of the fact that they were recognized figures and did not live a life of anonymity. One such name was that of Kokasa. This no doubt points to the respect for expertise and professionalism of the craft. There were manuals on building constructions. Shilpa Shastra were written in Sanskrit. The three types of temple architecture which we will be discussing today are the Nagara, Dravida and the Vesara or the mixed styles. But before that, let's look into the important elements of an early medieval temple. A Garbhagriha. What is a Garbhagriha? It's a sanctum sanctorum, a Pradakshina Patha or the circumambulatory path running along the Garbhagriha, a Mandapa or the hall or a series of mandapas and a porch. By the early medieval period, the temples in India had become grand both in its elevation and plan. Patrons and architects adding several mandapas between the Garbhagriha and the porch like the Nritya Mandapa or the dancing hall, Sabha Mandapa or the meeting hall, and Mahamandapa, the great hall, and Ranga Mandapa or the color hall. Let us first begin with the Nagara style. All the available texts agree that the Nagara style was prevalent in the region between the Himalayas and the Vindhyas. The characteristic feature of the Nagara style of temples was of the lofty tower or spire called the Shikhara. The Nagara style is typically characterized by the architectural wonder which ideally portray the craftsmanship of the artist. A study of the temples of northern India reveals two distinct features in planning and in elevation. In plan, the temples were basically quadrangle with graduated projections in the center. In elevation, it resembles a tower gradually inclining inwards in a convex curve. According to the plan, the projections are carried upwards to the top of the Shikhara and thus there is strong emphasis on vertical lines in elevation. Temples built in this style were spread over large parts of northern India, particularly in central India, Gujarat, Rajasthan and Orissa. However, even with the general Nagara style, there were distinctive regional characteristics. The Nagara style is widely distributed over a greater part of India, exhibiting distinct varieties and ramifications in lines of evolution and elaboration according to each locality. Some of the outstanding examples of this style are the Lingaraja temple at Bhubaneswar, the Sun temple at Konark, and the Kandariya Mahadeva temple built by the Chandela king at Khajuraho. Let us move to the Dravida style of temple architecture now. The Dravida style of architecture emerged in South India. Temple architecture reached its climax during the rule of the Cholas. The Dravida style was common in South India, but it varied region to region. The imprint of regional architecture was a common feature in it. For example, in Kerala, the architecture takes a form that is unique to the region, built in wood rather than stone. The early Chola temples were small and simple. An early example of the Dravida style of temple architecture is the 8th century temple of Kailasanatha in Kanchipuram and temple at Nattamalai built during the 9th century. And this is an example of the early Dravida style of temple architecture. Some of the important characteristics of this style are the Garbhagriha, the Vimana, the Mandapa and the Gopuram. The Garbhagriha was the inner sanctum that housed the chief deity to whom the temple was dedicated. The number of stories varied from 5 to 7 and they had a typical style which came to be called the Vimana. The Mandapa was a pillared hall with numerous carved pillars and a flat roof which was generally placed before the Garbhagriha. It acted as an audience hall and was a place for various other activities such as ceremonial dances which were performed by the Devadasis, the women dedicated to the service of the gods. The Gopurams were the lofty gates along the high walls that enclosed the entire temple complex. In course of time, the Vimanas rose higher and higher. The number of courtyards was increased to 2 or 3 and the Gopurams also became more and more elaborate, as seen in the temples at Madurai and Srirangam. It was from the 11th century that the Cholas began building royal temples which were more spectacular and grandeur. An example of this style is the Brihadeshwara temple built by Chola king Rajaraja I at Tanjore. Dedicated to Shiva, the temple was originally surrounded by 2 prakara walls and has a gopuram on the east entrance and 3 small Turanas on the other 3 sides. While the outer prakara is now completely lost, the gopuram still stands on the east. An enormous stone image of Nandi stands in front of the temple. The main temple is constructed out of granite and is 180 feet in length and consists of a Mukhamandapa, Ardhamandapa, an Antarala, a Garbhagriha, and a Pradakshinapath. Let us look at the stylistic differences between the Dravida and Nagara style of temple architecture. First, a Dravida temple is surrounded by a wall or prakara. Dravida temples are also known for their colossal gateways or gopurams, which is not found in the Nagara style of architecture. The shikhara of a Dravida temple is of pyramid shaped, whereas for the Nagara temple, it is curvilinear in nature. Let us now move on to the Vesara style of temple architecture. The architecture of the Deccan or Vesara style was an amalgamation of the Nagara and Dravida style of architecture. These structures were mostly built under the patronage of the Chalukyas and are to be found at Pattadakal near Badami in Karnataka. There was also great improvement in the art of making sculptures in this period. An important contribution of Chola artists in this respect was a bronze image of Nataraja. These images represent Shiva in his cosmic dance and are unmatched in their rhythm and balance. A few examples of the Vesara style were the Durga temple at Aihole or the Virupaksha temple at Pattadakal. The Virupaksha temple is a symmetrically planned complex with a compound secured by walls and shrines, with gateways on the east and the west. Within the compound stands the pavilion of Nandi. The temple consists of a linga sanctuary surrounded by a passageway, which opens into a mandapa square in design with freestanding columns creating aisles. The sculptures on the outer walls speaks of the greatness of Chalukya's plastic art. Panels on the passageway walls are mostly devoted to Shiva, though the icons of Bhikshatana, Bhairavi, Lakulisha holding a club, and Harihara is also to be found. The central projection on the north passageway walls has a formally posed 8 armed images of Vishnu. In the Deccan, the antechambers were large, probably imitating the Chaitya halls of the Buddhists. This must have been due to the large gatherings of audiences. The Deccan temples preserved the earlier tradition of the Chalukya style. Gradually, they became more decorative and accentuated by the use of soapstones than sandstone. The temples built by the later Chalukyas and Hoysalas also revealed the change in the ground plan and elevation. The Hoysala temple at Helibid, Belur, and Somnathpura is a fine example of it. The earlier style of a rectangular ground plan was placed by a star-shaped or polygonal one and built on a raised platform. This ground style gave enough space for sculpture and bas-relief. The emphasis on gopurams and shikharas was not much as in South India. The temple walls carried the decorations of animals and floral motifs, musicians, dancers, battle scenes, etc. As we come to the end of this lecture, for a few suggested readings, I would recommend our students to go through Satish Chandra's History of Medieval India and Romila Thapar's Early India from Origins to AD 1300. Other significant names of the books in this regard are, I suggest that our students could read books on Indian temple architectures, or they could also read about art of ancient India, or they could read about the temple architectures of Karnataka, and also the early history of Deccan in this regard. As for question and answers in this segment, the common question would be the architectural trends of the early medieval Indian period. The other question on this topic would be the stylistic differences between the Nagara, Vesara, and the Dravida style of temple architecture. Please use bullet points while writing the answers. In the next session, we will be discussing the Jati Pratha or the caste system. Before leaving, let me summarize the lecture for today's sessions. We have discussed the development of temple architecture in early medieval India and the different styles that prevailed. We basically focused on the three styles, the Nagara, the Vesara and the Dravida style, each unique and yet having features that were widely recognized. Dear learners, that is it for today. We will meet you soon in yet another interesting session. Till then, take care and stay safe. Thank you.
ইমান সময় আমি স্বয়ং প্ৰভা DTH চেনেল 20 যোগে সম্প্ৰচাৰিত কৃষ্ণকান্ত সন্দিকৈ ৰাজ্যিক মুক্ত বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ বিদ্যায়তনিক অনুষ্ঠানটিৰ আজিৰ খণ্ডটি উপভোগ কৰিলো। এই বিদ্যায়তনিক অনুষ্ঠানটিৰ জৰিয়তে শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল নিশ্চয়কৈ ভালেখিনি উপকৃত হৈছে। পুনৰ আন এটি বিষয় লৈ আমি আপোনালোকৰ মাজলৈ আহিম। নমস্কাৰ।